10 grams, alone in the dark. A mushroom trip report, sent in by a subscriber. From all those who replied to my previous post, you really did seem to want to hear this, which gave me the motivation to finish it up. Thank you for all the support. I enjoyed writing this. A scary, stupid title, right? Well, I'd be lying if I said the experience wasn't both. This will be a long one, but I hope it's a worthwhile read for all of you who are part of this amazing community. Anyways, let me start. I definitely need to provide some context. This happened quite a while back, so I'm no longer super confident in my report doing it any levels of justice. If I'm being honest, even immediately after, I could hardly put it to words properly. I was fairly young, and 2 months detached from a 9-month rehab process. I had a menagerie of trauma from my childhood that finally caught up to me in mid-high school, which saw me fall off a cliff in every aspect of my life. I quit sports which I had D1 offers in, went from a 4.0 student at a highly academic school to failing out of multiple classes, withdrawing from friends completely, breaking up my girlfriend, etc. I also found myself in some severe substance abuse, largely day, binge drinking, benzo use, but there was a lot more to it. I absolutely tried to help myself, but by the time I and those around me realised the severity of what was going on, nothing short of serious help could have worked. After 2 hospitalisations for a suicide attempt and intentional overdose, in which both times I was found unresponsive, I willingly opened up and got the help I needed. This was easily the most difficult and arguably worst experience of my life. But that being said, I am here now because of it. After returning to my life, I was doing really well and was completely sober. 3.5 months in, and I found myself presented with the opportunity to do mushrooms. My sister, who I had introduced to shrooms, had gotten a mushroom chocolate bar. I know, save the "you definitely didn't take shrooms, I beg of thee," I was also sceptical as well. I decided it would be a good opportunity to reflect on my journey out of such a dark place, and gain some perspective for the future. Prior to this, I had done dried mushrooms a handful of times, yet never seemed to experience a trip the way I'd heard it described. I now know that this was due to the laundry list of medications I was taking, which were completely blocking the mushroom's effects. I'm fairly certain of this, but feel free to ask questions anyway. Because of my inability to feel them, I had worked my way up to 7.5 to 8.5 dried grams, experiencing only a minimal trip, most comparable to about 1 to 1.5 grams of PCP+. Regardless, they had a tangible positive effect on me, even with how poorly I was doing, so I agreed. Going into this, long since going off all meds, I decided I'd start above where I did last time, because I truly wanted to trip. I was also a suspect of the bar, and mentally jumped to the conclusion that I wouldn't feel anything with the highly mixed opinions I'd heard about these types of mushroom products. So come the night we planned for the trip, and I'm with my sister, some of my closest friends and some of hers, all of whom I know very well. It was 7:30 when I decided to take them. I read the label. Per square, 1.5 grams magic blend, it said. I thought to myself, magic blend? Poor sis must have got scammed. In hindsight, I should have immediately wanted to test what the hell was in the bar. But I was here now, and naively committed to taking it because teenage me, no matter how rehabilitated I was, didn't feel like waiting to trip or wasting mushrooms. I ate 7 squares. Basically the whole thing minus the 3-gram dose my sister wanted. I greeted the 2 last friends who arrived at exactly that time. They headed to my basement to go hang out with the rest while I ran to my room to grab myself a charger, realising my phone was almost dead. Getting a bit sidetracked along with making sure I had everything prepped for a comfy and organised trip, I headed downstairs after 15 minutes. We collectively decided to order some food, and over the next 10 minutes of my phone being passed around like a mini menu, we did. Just as it was handed back to me for the order to be placed, I looked to my right and watched a photo of a horse on my wall melt. I'd never seen anything like this before. I'd only ever seen minor and faint movement that was fleeting and brief. As my eyes locked with the horse in the photo, the colours all mixed together and flowed down off the frame. Whatever I was looking at certainly wasn't a horse anymore. The first thing that came to my mind was, how long has it been? Realising only 25 minutes had passed, and that a come up doesn't even usually begin for an hour, I was struck with the very justified thought of, oh fuck. As I looked back down to my phone, I lost the ability to understand anything I saw on it. I completely lost my train of thought and any sense of what I was doing. As a hint of fear crawled into my mind, I tried to pull myself together. I got off the floor and followed a friend who was going to get water towards the stairs out of the basement. I tapped her on the shoulder and said something along the lines of, "I'm going to be pretty gone tonight, so if it's not too much to ask, do you mind keeping me in check?" She had done shrooms and understood them. However, she was still shocked and asked what was going on. I explained the short time frame and how I was already having visuals unlike I'd ever had before. She was calm and understanding about it, and walked me back to the rest of the group. As I sat there, the lights became overwhelming. The iconic hum and insectoid droning, as well as the other fairly standard auditory hallucinations, began to creep in, as well as a body high intense enough to leave me almost immobile. I dimmed the lights as someone asked when the food was arriving. I checked only to realise I had not only given the wrong address, but never had ordered the food in the first place. We went about adding everything again, and once again when it came time to order it, I was completely unable to. My friends all kinda caught on to the fact that something was up, and I explained everything up until this point. They all laughed in a sweet way, and most understood to a certain degree where I was at. They did their best to make me comfy, showing me cool things and basically set the environment to be as nice as possible. I had amazing friends. But of course, they still wanted to enjoy their night, and I didn't sign anyone up for trip sitting. They all went upstairs, offering to take me with them, but I was still feeling great and said I'd hang back for a bit, listen to some music and wait for them to head back down. Really just didn't think I could move with the body high right now. In the hour they spent up there, I had one of the most magical experiences of my life. With my eyes open, the world was overlaid with visuals. Their surroundings were not moving, but rather the movement and visuals were imprinted on my eyes and were consistent wherever I looked. Everything was flowing, sparkling. It was beautiful. I felt physically amazing. My whole body was vibrating in the most incredible way. When I closed my eyes, it was a separate world of colours, visuals, and briefly 3 vague figures made of visual distortions. All the former moved and danced to what I was listening to amongst a sea of complex and ever-changing colourful fractals. I became aware of a joke. Some comedic cosmic truth to life that answered so many questions. I began to audibly laugh at the absurdity of everything, and of the revelations I was having. It was my first time experiencing this aspect of psychedelics. As my friends came back down, they saw me face down in the couch giggling like a child. It was now 9:10, and as I took my music out to spend time with them, I found myself unable to follow their words. When a sentence was spoken, I would hear one word of it very loudly, but in a very soft tone. By the time I'd processed and registered that word, the sentence would be over and I would be left unaware of what was said. I tried my best to respond and talk with them, but I supposedly was adding completely unrelated notes to the conversations and overall made no sense. This is where things took a turn. I began to feel kind of horrible, at least emotionally. I had all my favourite people in the world around me, but I couldn't properly enjoy the time with them. We were disconnected. Why? I thought. And the answer came quickly. It was drug use. Why the fuck was I on mushrooms in the first place? Why would I ever do this much with so many people around? This isn't fun at all. I'm completely alone and truly isolated. I'd handled everything about this experience in a manner I thought I'd grown past. No one here is remotely able to connect with me, and that's all my fault. Why was I even at this level? The last time I'd been incoherent as a result of substances, I was in such an awful place. The last time anyone here saw me remotely similar to this was when they were terrified for me, worried about me. I felt so upset. All my pent-up negative emotions towards myself and the damage I'd caused to my life came flooding back. Thoughts towards myself and life I believed no longer had a place in my mind began to arise. Emotions I had worked to deal with and move past returned so rapidly. In moments, the bliss and beauty I'd been experiencing was ripped away by all-consuming dread, fear, and sadness. I couldn't stand to be around those that had seen me at my worst, to have to see me in a similar form again. I told them I was a bit too high, and would try lying down for a bit as a way to escape the situation. I walked off and lay down in bed. But here was where I began to panic. The high and the newly prevalent negative emotions kept feeding off each other. I panicked repeatedly over nothing. I began to have thought loops for the first time. I've never been able to describe them well, so apologies for that. What's happening? Who am I? Am I okay? Am I dying? Every time I answered one of these questions, I'd find myself beginning to question another, and I cycled through them for God knows how long. My mind was all over the place. I experienced auditory hallucinations that sounded like people running around the house panicking. My sister in tears saying, "I don't know," repeatedly. None of these were real. There was only a few people close enough to me that I would have even heard anything from them, and they were all hanging out in a relaxed manner. I concluded that I had to do something. It didn't matter what. After finally quitting piecing me back together and letting go of whatever aspects of me I was struggling to remember, I got out of bed and quickly got myself to a bathroom due to a combination of needing water and nausea. I don't remember anything past leaving the bed to go to the bathroom. The next thing I know, I'm just on a bathroom floor with the door wide open, and one of my friends looking wide-eyed at me. He said he was walking past and saw me in the fetal position on the bathroom floor and asked if I was okay. "I'm really fucked up right now. I think I should just go to bed," I said to him. He then went and grabbed the girl I spoke to earlier, and she helped me to my room, doing everything she could to make sure I was as comfortable and in as safe an environment as possible. I urged her to leave me, promising I was totally fine, but that it was best for me to sleep this off. She agreed and left me to myself. I now believe that I was so frustrated with myself, and so certain my negative interpretation of their thoughts was reality, that I wanted to be away from them completely, so they couldn't see me like this, so they wouldn't worry or be disappointed in me. My complete inexperience with this intense of a psychedelic trip meant I didn't have the capacity to see why I was thinking this way or how to grow or challenge it. I had allowed a grossly negative perspective to become how I viewed everything. I concluded that it was objective, and all around me saw things the same way. It's a bit funny in hindsight, since I was so far from the truth and spiralling based on a view of reality that wasn't remotely true. It was now somehow 11 PM. I'd spent almost 2 hours between the laying in bed and the bathroom, even though the hindsight made it seem like minutes, and the experience like a full lifetime. I was alone, in a dark room, on 10 grams of mushrooms. I continued to experience the auditory hallucinations of panicked people, distraught people. These were contrasted by less frequent noises of happy and ecstatic people. I began to have almost this dialogue of my own mind. Me, or my immediate self, was confused, scared, sad and worried. What's going on, I thought, and then the other half came in. You're dying, that's it. I was confused. Why am I dying? I don't want to die. Can I stop this? What will happen to everyone in my life? I don't want to bring them any more sadness. I felt regret. I'd spent almost half a decade wishing I was dead. I tried to act on those feelings, and after finally pulling myself out of a deep pit, I'd really gone and done myself in, surrounded by people that cared about me and had so recently shared how good it was seeing me in a better place. The other voice answered my questions, explained what was going to happen and what was happening. I was apparently experiencing the night out of order. I could hear the inevitable moments, the auditory hallucinations of panic, where I'm found unresponsive, but I currently haven't reached that point in time yet. The other me also goes on to explain that the result is inevitable. There's really nothing I can do anymore but wait. I felt crushed. I was totally distraught, and I was so nervous too. I was sure my own death this night was an inevitability, but I simply had to sit alone until it decided to come. I have a genuine memory from this time of somehow having visuals for the next morning, walking around in an oddly white, artificially lit world, seeing my mum in the state she was in after my death, but I couldn't interact with her. When I tried, she just looked blankly at me. It was unnerving and like she was silently staring into my soul. There was another experience like this, that I know, but I cannot remember it. This was likely due to how insanely and unimaginably vivid my imagination had become. Then, as I was at my lowest, the voice started explaining what this meant, what death really was. It walked me through my memories, but this time, I experienced them from other people's perspectives, and then other people's memories as well as future experiences. First people I knew, and then people I didn't. As this happened, I began to realise the reason for two me's and what was being shown. I believed that technically everyone is inherently identical, but the different physical experiences and developed emotional perspectives from unique social experiences shape the individuality of us, the ego I guess. So I was actually talking to an egoless individual, essentially me, if I knew everything, but had physically experienced nothing. Yet there isn't an everyone. The reason everyone is inherently the same is because we are all a single thing or being. Things began to move faster. It felt as if I was experiencing the beginning of humanity to the end, as this line that expanded infinitely in both directions. This also encapsulated emotions and the inescapable duality of them. How the negative must exist, or the positive couldn't, as well as exactly what this meant and how it has applied to me, plus how it would have continued to apply to me in the future. Then this auditory sensation washed over me. I wish I could describe it. It might have been some mix of a hum, a whir, electronic beeping and wind. It began to speed up and get louder. As I finally lost any touch with reality or myself, and was fully accepting of whatever the hell was about to happen to me, I swear I heard something to the same vibe of, welcome home. I was face to face with some kind of being. I physically gasped, and for a brief period, continuously gasped for air because of how overwhelmed I was. It radiated what I can only describe as everything out of it in all directions. The smallest fraction of it was a singular moment of my life, and how small that fraction was I cannot describe. Though a moment in my life was such an infinitely small part of this thing, there was so much more to a single moment that I could have ever understood. It was like having all the chaos and disorganization of the universe visually laid out in front of me. The complex causes of everything, but presented in a way that I could process and understand all of them at once. It was the closest I've ever been to understanding infinity, as well as everything. How I came to be, what I am, how everything came to be, and what everything is. I remember feeling like I knew this thing, or place. It was like deja vu. It's such a hard part of the trip to remember, but I had this notion of how every one of its vibrations, which were infinite, and every tiny detail of its different ejected sound, also infinite, created everything around us. It was the centre of everything. Truly everything. But somehow, it was also me. I kept trying to wrap my head around it, and I would get so close, but every time I pieced a part of it together, I could feel, hear and understand that a pressure and tension was building. The closer I got, the more it built. It felt like I needed to. I had to explain down to the smallest detail what everything is. What it is that which I'm witnessing truly means, but I couldn't explain it at all. Every time I got close, every time I was on the cusp of getting it, I failed to put the last piece in the puzzle. I'd briefly get stuck, and subsequently, it all leaked out of my head, so I had to start again. I've no idea how long I tried, but finally I gave up. I simply experienced it all, assuming it was my eternity. I was completely at peace. It really was just pure euphoria. I felt physically felt, heard, and experienced everything in its infinity. The negative emotions which had gripped me so tightly in the previous hours were gone, as if they had never even come up. I didn't need to feel afraid. I knew no matter what happened next, everything would be okay. Not what that meant or what would come next, but that I shouldn't be scared. Tonight was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Slowly, I began to come down. I hardly remember leaving that state. The next memory I have is being in my room, having turned the lights on, thinking what the fuck just happened. I checked and it was 2:30 AM. I picked myself up and walked out of my room to check in on everyone. I knew there was a chance some would still be around, albeit looking to end the night. I was right, and I had the opportunity to sit with my closest two friends, as well as my sister while the come down continued. And it was a classic come down. An oddly quiet world. Rose-tinted in a way, but not literally. One that felt calm, as if everything was in its right place. The brilliant explosions of earlier had faded to fleeting twinkles. It was relieving and bittersweet. It took something so much more incredible than this world to make me see how I love everything about it. It took an acceptance of what I thought was the end to finally grasp why I wanted to keep living. I shared what was on my mind as best I could, trying to be conscious of the fact that they were likely exhausted and not up to some wild spiritual rambling. Still, I was satisfied with what I could and did say. It felt relieving. I finally realised many things that an outside observer would have found obvious in my circumstance. I hadn't gained direct or easily summarised knowledge about what to do next, but I didn't need that at all. I didn't need a completed puzzle. I knew and accepted that my puzzle may never be complete. I don't even know what picture I'm piecing together, but the beauty was in the effort and the progress. I did, in a straightforward manner, realise how awfully skewed my perceptions had been. They hadn't been panicking over me. They assumed I just went to sleep, and more than anything found it funny that I organised a mini party which I only participated in for a few hours while tripping balls. They weren't worried about me, because they trusted me to take care of myself now. I hadn't ruined anything like I'd thought. I was given exactly what I had intended for on this trip, in a way I would never have expected. I went in looking for a reflection on my journey, as well as perspective for the future. I was shown exactly what I had wished for in the past: drugs and my death. Yet my current self found it unbearable and lonely. While I used to be numb to the emotions brought about by this action, this night they rendered me distraught. I saw where I had been, and still to that night was wrong. I knew now how and why I could walk away from the past 5 years. I had people I loved to spend time with. I had paths yet to walk, questions yet to answer, and emotions yet to feel. I really had made progress. It wasn't a lie. I had so much to do tomorrow. Coming out of this trip, I continued to improve. I spent the next day with my dad, and it was wonderful. My life reached heights I could have never thought possible months prior. I stayed clean from everything other than highly infrequent and significantly lower dose shroom trips for a long while after. Today I can confidently say without feeling like a liar that I have a healthy relationship with myself and substances. Well, that's all I can think of to add for now. Thank you so much for reading if you got this far, and I hope it was worth your time. There is much I've left unsaid, much I cannot think to say now, yet will wish to add later. But I did want to finally get this out of my drafts. If you have any questions, please let me know.